Hey everybody, this is Mike Van Meter and welcome to the Recovery is Possible podcast, and I want to thank you for joining me. You can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, or our website, which is vanmeterwellnesssolutions.com. And this podcast exists to educate the public about addiction, remove the stigma associated with addiction, and offer help and support to those suffering from addiction. And this episode is sponsored by FHE Health, a substance abuse and mental health treatment center specializing in treatment for first responders' needs, including PTSD, anxiety, and substance use. Take the first steps to a better life today by visiting FHEHealth.com. And folks, today I've got Buddy C coming in, and he's from Atlanta, Georgia. And he's going to give us his qualification, meaning his sobriety date, and the work that he's involved in. And I'm not going to steal his thunder because I want you to hear his story from him, because it's his story to tell, and he's going to take us on a journey to really looking at what he is using for a higher power, or the path that he has taken regarding his higher power. And I was just talking to Buddy a little while ago before we came on the show about how I just spent the last year working in a treatment center, a 28-day treatment center, and a large number of the patients that came in really struggled with the idea of a higher power. And if you're new to recovery, what we mean by that is one of the things you're going to find in recovery is that you need to find a power outside of yourself. And sounds kind of like an easy concept. Well, apparently it's not, because lots and lots of people struggle with the idea of a higher power, but it is something that is very important, a concept that is very important to have in recovery. Now, that path and that journey is going to be different for different people, and Buddy's going to talk about the path that he took. And Buddy had reached out to me discussing the podcast, and he has sort of an interesting approach that may be for you, may not be for you. No one's telling you in recovery what you should or shouldn't do, or what you should or shouldn't believe. But what we do want to do is open our minds to what works for other people. And that's really what it is. All I have in my recovery is my sobriety, and all I can do for you is explain what worked for me. Now, of course, I've gone into the graduate work that I've gone into, and we look at studies, and we look at the data, we look at all the research that's available to us. But, ultimately, we present information, and then you make your own choice. And Buddy's going to talk to us about the path that he took. So with that, I want to introduce you to Buddy C.
Thank you, Mike, for having me. Buddy C, I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date's 11/10/08. But that is not the first time that I sought sobriety through AA. I had been coming to AA since 2002, and I just could not get it. I was that guy that was, in and out, a week, a month, 6 months. I was a successful businessman, had a thriving business with, the lake house, the new Suburban, the 2 kids, and the wife, all the things. But I could not stop drinking. I could not figure it out. To qualify a little, I'll go back before then. I started drinking heavy actually in my late 20s, early 30s, as a way to handle stress from business and how to relieve that. And it just, we say we have a drink, the drink has a drink, then the drink has you. Well, the drink had me very quickly. And I was drinking daily, and being that I worked from home most of the time, I got to where I was drinking 24/7 in no time. Time went on, and all this time I was going to church. I had a real experience with God in my early teens, which continued through my teens on up into my 20s. But that did not help when I had I did not know real connection. I had some connection, but it was not enough when things were really difficult, because I thought I understood God, and things weren't happening the way they were supposed to for me. It was supposed to be an easy ride because I was checking off all the boxes, but it was not an easy ride. So I was questioning those things all that time. And then when I got into recovery, in that gap there, after I started drinking heavy, I started putting on weight. So I went on the Atkins diet, which is the only diet I could figure out that I could still drink my 90 proof Smirnoff and lose weight on the diet. So, so that's the diet. I switched my mixer from orange juice or grapefruit juice to Crystal Light lemonade. Okay, so I cut out all sugar other than my vodka. Could not cut my vodka out. Did not plan on doing that. And then one day I woke up and I had a bad stomach pain and I had pancreatitis. Lost 90% of my pancreas. Was on a ventilator. Told my wife I had a 50-50 chance of living to go pick out my pallbearers. And I survived. I was in the hospital for a number of weeks, lost 60 pounds in the process. So I was down to 133 pounds. Uh, and I came out, and within, a couple of months, I was drinking again. I just could not stop. And like I said, I eventually ended up in AA, and I still could not stop. And what happened was I had to really come to the point of suicide, quite honestly. And I, uh, I finally got to a point where I said, okay, either this works or it doesn't. Uh, God, either this is or it isn't. If this doesn't work, I'm out of here. And the craving left immediately. And I was like, is this all it took? Basically, I needed all of that time to learn how to surrender. So I saw myself surrender, but yet I did not know really how it happened other than I just let go and quit trying. But that wasn't enough for me. I had to really start looking at, what am I lacking spiritually? And I realized that all of my teaching I'd had to that point in uh, Christianity was lacking something. And I did not know what that was because when I came in, like I said, there were folks that were getting recovery that did not qualify for recovery. God should not have been doing anything for them because they could not check off the proper boxes. And so I had to be very open-minded and come at recovery from a position of not knowing. So I started looking at different philosophies to see if it would help me with this. I looked at all the Gnostic readings, I read the Nag Hammadi through. Started looking at other books and other teachings. I started looking at Buddhism and looking at, I knew of Taoism, but I didn't know much about it. And I came across a painting. It's called The Vinegar Tasters. And it's a metaphorical meeting between Confucius, Lao Tzu, who is contributed with writing the Tao Te Ching, which is the basic text, Taoist text, and Buddha. And the three had a meeting where at that time they did a lot of vinegar tasting. They had vinegar tastings where people would get together and taste and give their opinion on, because they use vinegar a lot for a lot of medicinal reasons and in a lot of things. So they had a vinegar tasting. Confucius tasted the vinegar, and the Confucius teachings are a lot like Proverbs in the Bible. So he tasted it, and his response was, "Why should anyone want to taste this? It tastes bad." Buddha tasted the vinegar, and he said, we suffer because of our attachment to wanting things to taste good, blah, blah, blah. Lao Tzu tasted the vinegar, and he smiled. He said, "It's vinegar. It's how it's supposed to taste. Why are y'all upset about everything?" And I thought, that's it. That's acceptance. So when I saw that, I said, I need to start looking at different Taoist texts. If they're showing acceptance, maybe that's something that will help me, because acceptance in recovery is so huge. We have a lot of acceptance teaching, and we use the acceptance story with the pages 417 through 420. We just wear out in meetings all the time. So I said, let me look at this a little closer. So I started reading the Tao Te Ching, which is 81 verses. It's the basic Taoist text. Now, I still have Christian beliefs. All of this just added to my idea of what God is God being love. It just added to my ability to accept my day and my moment for what it is. So I started reading these and liked them. They resonated with me. I really, I said, that really makes sense to me. So we started having an online recovery meeting in a recovery group I was involved, studying these texts. And we would take one verse a week, and that would be our topic for the week. And we'd read through and look at it and talk about it. As time went on, we did that for several years. Then the pandemic came along. And I thought, I wonder if I could take these 81 verses that we've studied over and over and just write not a translation, but an interpretation of what they would mean to me in my recovery. So I sat down and started writing and went through all 81 of the verses, and that's how we got here. I published the book last August. I do offer a free PDF to anyone who would like a copy of the PDF. They can go to buddyc.org. They can also get a sample of the different verses there. I have several of the verses on the homepage. And there's also on the homepage, there's a couple of menus there you might want to look at. There's a resources, has a lot of recovery resources. And then there's a daily devotion they may want to sign up for. And I take one Taoist quote and I put a thought with it and an affirmation. So that's how we got here, Mike. Any questions?
No, and surrender really is the important thing to all of this. And buddy, and I'll just get your thoughts on this. One of the weird things about addiction, and it's not just alcohol or drugs, it could be any addiction, is this idea of surrender. And when you're a person like myself, where if you know my background, my professional background, I was trained at a very early age to not give in to anything, that whatever the obstacle is, you can overcome the obstacle. There are no limits to what you can do. This idea that you can overcome any difficulty. In my line of work, that's a great thing to have. In fact, it's a necessary thing to have. But if you are an addict or an alcoholic, it's a death sentence. Because the weird thing about addiction is it's the one thing that you cannot defeat of your own willpower. And so when Buddy, you mentioned page 417, and for those that may not be aware of that, he's talking about page 417 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. It talks about this idea of acceptance of your disease, acceptance of your alcohol, in this case, alcohol, and really just surrendering to it. And the weird thing is that this is the one thing in your life that you defeat by giving up, and you defeat by not fighting it. It's a weird thing. You don't fight it. You just give in to the reality of what it is. And by doing that, you overcome it. It's a weird concept, but it sounds like that's what you were struggling with, because I know that's what I was struggling with and all the patients I work with. That's it. It's what can I do to defeat this? What can I do to control this? In fact, I just had a young man reach out to me before I came on the air saying, hey, I'm drinking too much. What can I do to slow this down and regulate it? That was the question this person said to me. And, I hear you giggling because it's true. Yeah. It's there. This, first of all, let's put it this way. If you've gotten to the point in your life, and if you're listening to this podcast, I want you to think about this. If you've gotten to the point to where you're having a discussion about how alcohol is a problem and that it needs to be regulated because it's a problem, well, then by definition, it's a problem. And to regulate that thing that's causing problems in your life is something that really, really needs to be addressed, because normal social drinkers don't have those conversations. Just let that sink in for a minute. They don't even have, like my wife is not alcoholic. She does not have conversations with me about how she needs to regulate her drinking, right? If you need to regulate it, it's probably because either you're having that conversation with yourself, or more likely someone else is having that conversation with you. So anyway, buddy, maybe just some thoughts on that, because I think that's the heart of what you're getting to.
It really is, Mike. For me, the whole program is about surrender. And what I heard in Taoist philosophy was things like, and everything, this was written 2,500 years ago. So all the analogies are nature and water related. So can you allow the mud to settle in a turbid water? Can you allow the mud to settle so the right answers appear by themselves? I'm like, yeah, that's it. The whole idea for me in recovery is to step out of the way and allow it to happen. How do I step out of the way? How do I stop fighting anything and anyone? And if you want to know the ideas of Taoist philosophy in the big book, if you're in recovery and you use the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's pages 85, 86, 87. Those are the pages that show that idea of ceasing to fight anything and anyone, even alcohol. It just comes. That whole idea is Taoist in that we have, it's called Wu Wei. It's effortless effort. And it's not that there's no effort, it's what are you putting your effort in? And for me, when I came into recovery, and as I continued, I realized that, like working with others says, there's nothing that works. I'm going to butcher the quote, but it says there's nothing that, when you need to drink, when you have a craving, there's nothing that works like as well as working intensive work with another alcoholic. It works when other activities fail. So the idea is not that you wait until you think you have it figured out to help someone. It's that you start helping the moment you come into recovery. Now, of course, if you're going out on talking to someone who's drinking, that kind of thing, you would have someone with you. You have some guidelines there, but you come in and start helping immediately. If it's no more than welcoming people or sharing in a meeting when there's a new guy that you have a month and he just came in, he wants to hear from the guy that has a month. He doesn't want to hear from the guy that's got 10 years or 20 years or 30 years because that's unattainable to him. But a month, yes. So I get recovery by helping someone else. So I had to take the focus off of myself and put my focus on who could I help. So if I prayed, it would not be God help me. It'd be God, who can I help? And then as I do that and get the focus off of me, I find myself taken care of. And my effort is placed in helping others, not in helping myself. And that's the dichotomy and the paradox that I really find in recovery. And what the steps do for me, the steps get me out of the way. When I do my fourth and fifth step, I'm acknowledging my fears and I'm learning how to surrender those fears that keep me bound so that I can't get out of my way. And then when I go on to my eighth and ninth steps, I'm doing the same thing with the people around me. I'm mending those relationships. So it doesn't have to be about me. So I can look at people through a filter of love and virtue instead of just being afraid of everything and everyone. And that's the approach for me, and it is all about surrender. The whole program for me is surrender.
Yeah, I think that was true of me as well, because something that you and I both share in our story is that recovery did not come easy. It took a long, long time, for me to get into recovery, and it did with you as well, and that's not uncommon. I really think that, for me, I had to be one of those people that had to be driven to the bottom. What was a bottom for me? A bottom for me and a bottom for you may be different bottoms, but it was a bottom for me. And in our last episode of Recovery is Possible, we had a lady come on and talked about high bottom, meaning, you don't have to wait until you get to your bottom. You can nip this in the bud. And if you can do that, that's fantastic. And that's, I would recommend that if you can. You don't have to suffer, years and years of destruction in your life before you get well. But for many of us, that's exactly what happened. And many of the patients that I work with now, that's exactly what happens. This is something that must be driven to them to the very end, and it's the surrender. So if you have someone like this individual that just reached out to me and said, "Hey, I think I'm drinking too much. What can I do to regulate that?" And that's very common. At the end of the day, most again, I'm talking alcohol here, but the same can apply to drugs or other issues. Is the reality is we don't really want to get rid of alcohol. We just want to control alcohol and go back to the way that it was when we first started, because addiction is a progressive and deadly disease. Progressive disease. It gets worse over a period of time. And what happens is we as alcoholics think, well, I want to go back to when it was fun. I want to go back to when I could regulate it, when I could, turn it on, turn it off when I wanted to. I want those days back. The idea of not drinking seems to not be an option for a lot of people in their mind. And again, I'm not being critical because that was me too, but I want to get your take on that, buddy, and maybe kind of address that a little bit. This idea that the person wants to regulate rather than eliminate their use.
When I came into recovery, that's exactly what I wanted. And I misread the steps. I thought the first step said that I was powerless over alcohol, that my drinking was unmanageable. I just read it that way. And it was years before I said, whoa, wait a minute. That doesn't say I, it says we, and then it says my life was unmanageable. Like, wait a minute. Is this, and I started looking, and the only steps that even mention alcohol are the first one and the 12th, and the 12th's about carrying the message to others. So the first step's the only one that's really talking about alcohol as in an issue for us. And what we find is we have for me, I had all of these fears that I drank, and I had these resentments, and I drank to forget those things. So the reason I was drinking, if you took away the alcohol, I would have still been miserable, absolutely miserable. So for me, the alcohol was not the problem. It was just a symptom of the problem. And metering my alcohol would not have solved my problem. My problem was me. It was not the alcohol. I was just using the alcohol as a temporary fix that quit working. So if you're wanting to, I think that the whole idea of throttling your alcohol, controlling it, for me, I was already past the point that was possible. Like you said, when you start trying that, it's already too late for me, and I have other issues to deal with. So what I recommend, even if I have a sponsee that is not able to get sober, let's say they still drink occasionally, I go ahead and work through the steps with them. I don't, some people, if they drink, they start over again because they obviously didn't get this. No, I don't see that. I think that the success I've had with working with sponsees is that we don't worry about the drinking. We just start working the steps. And what we find is as we work the steps, if they're sincerely worked, the need to drink goes away. And that's, for me, it was a need, and it was a dependency. And once I worked through the steps, and once I learned how to surrender with that, it was no longer an issue, and hasn't been an issue since.
Yeah, and that's an interesting concept because, we do know, and we know this from the big book as well, but we also know it from the data and working in hospitals, that there's two things going on. This is causes and conditions, and this is a disease of the mind and the body. And we have to work on the mind part, and you just addressed that. But if you're drinking alcoholically right now, I do understand that there is a physical dependency as well, and that physical dependency has to be overcome. And do understand that, and this surprises a lot of people when we talk about this, that if you are somebody that has gotten to the point to where you're physically dependent on alcohol, and how would you know that? Well, if you're someone that when you stop drinking, you start going into a delirium tremens, maybe the shaking, hallucinations, sweating, things along those, having those physical symptoms, you're physically dependent, and you got to be safely walked down from alcohol. So that's an important concept to understand. So there is that physical dependency, and eventually, like to my friend that had wrote to me today, the problem with this is there's something about alcohol, when it gets put into our system, we start to crave it. When we don't have alcohol in our systems, I don't crave it today. Like I've been sober for many years, buddy, you've been sober for many years. My body actually does not crave alcohol anymore. What's going to cause me to go out and drink today will be something else. It will be something that happens in my life, something so overwhelming that I feel like that I can't control it, I can't deal with it, and I want to escape. That's the mental part will cause me to go back. And then once I start drinking, because I have this genetic pre-uploading, this genetic condition, my body will start to crave it again. And because of the genetic makeup that I have, I will crave it in a way that your average person, your non-alcoholic person, does not crave it. Does that make sense and kind of jive with where you're coming from as well, buddy?
Yes, it does. And you know, when I came into recovery, also, uh, I thought that, and this has just been my experience, that uh, I had to believe God to do this for me because that's the way I'd been taught with everything in life. If I do the right things, I believe the right things, I can have the results. Okay, it starts with belief and then the result and then the actions come. Then I do the right things. But in recovery, it was a flip of that. What I realized was no matter what I thought, no matter what I believed, I had to take action first. It's like, the saying of we act our way into right thinking instead of think our way into right acting. And what that meant for me was I had to go help someone. I had to pray for someone when I had a resentment. I had to get out of myself and take an action, and then the thinking followed the action. Very much like God being love. Okay, if God is love, God's an action, God's a verb. So I have to take the action of love. And when I do, uh, I change. I don't understand why, I don't understand how, but it happens. And it happens without my effort to change. My effort is in helping another. And it works with everything. When I was in business, I used to pray for my competitors' business. If I have a relationship issue, I pray for that person, whatever it is that's going on. We learned that. Big book would be the 552's the page that's mentioned a lot about that in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But it really is about me taking action. And that's how I try to approach all of life. So if I have any issue at all, I go to taking action. Do you have a couple of minutes I could tell an acceptance story that I think might resonate and
Absolutely.
give some?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. We didn't discuss this before, but I had a son pass away last summer. He
Oh
was
my God, I'm
25.
sorry. I'm sorry to hear
Well,
that.
thank you. Thank you. He was one of us. And I got a call, and they said that he had a temperature of 109, and they were taking him to the hospital. And I showed up at the hospital. All of his organs are shutting down. Just everything shutting down. He had dehydrated. Long story, but uh, in effect, he was dying. And he ended up living for a month after that. And he had brain damage. And his mom and I, we had decided that if there was, brain damage, that confirmed that we would turn off life support, but yet, she couldn't do it. So, it was just a mess. I mean, an absolute mess. And I just gotten back I do Zen meditation with the Zen Center in Atlanta. I'm not a Buddhist, but I enjoy meditating with them. I like the philosophy. So I just gotten back from a 3-day silent meditation retreat on Sunday, and this happened on a Wednesday. So when I got to the hospital and saw what was going on, uh, immediately started praying for the other family members. This is an ex-wife, so immediately praying for her and their family and everyone else that they would find some peace and acceptance during this. And when I got home the next day, I got called in early that morning that he was dying and I needed to get there. And he didn't die, and they transferred him to a hospital in Atlanta that was much more prepared to take care of him and much more capable. And when that happened, I went home and I realized I had to get some acceptance with this. I had to get some peace with this. And acceptance doesn't mean that I approve of what's going on. It just means that I accept things as they are in that moment. Because I can't look to change things like we say in the Serenity Prayer until I can see things more clearly as they are. Because if I'm not seeing them clearly, how can I change something? I can't. So I sat and meditated and sat with this it took a couple of hours actually. And I sat with, and I used 2 mantras with this. And neither one of these I learned in AA, which is surprising. I've learned them both from my Zen friends. One was a story of Sono. She was a Buddhist nun back years and years ago and very well known. And a man came to her and said, listen, I have a problem with anger. What can I do about it? She said, every time anything happens, good or bad, say, thank you for everything. I have no complaint whatsoever. So he did this for a year. Then he came back and he said, listen, nothing's changed. Everybody still makes me angry. And she looked at him and said, thank you for everything. I have no complaint whatsoever. And then he realized it was about changing him, not the people around. So I use that mantra, thank you for everything. I have no complaint whatsoever. And I use that over and over and over. And every time I used it, it got lighter and lighter and lighter. Now I use the second one that is much more difficult than that one. And this one says, whatever the problem or issue that you're having, and I'll say my son's medical condition in mind, I would not change Max's medical condition even if I could. And you're saying that from a place of no, your head is screaming, just like we learn on page 552 that in the big book, we pray for someone that we have a resentment against, even if we don't mean it, it's empty words, we say it anyway. And within 2 weeks, we'll come to mean it. Well, I sat with that and repeated that over and over. I would not change Max's medical condition, even if I could. Of course, I would if I could at first. And I kept saying that over and over. And with time, within the 2 hours, I got to a place of peace about it. And that's the acceptance I'm talking about. Then over the next month, I went back and forth to Atlanta, and I live 2 hours from Atlanta. And so I back and forth. They called us in twice to pull life support because he was dying. And then it didn't happen. And then, just over and over and over the month, when I sat in that waiting room, I knew all the other people were there for some of the same reasons I was. So I started praying for those people when it was bothering me. I prayed for each of the rooms in the ICU around the whole circle. I would do that. I did all those things of giving, and that kept me whole during that time. I'm not saying it was easy, because it was not, but learning acceptance kept me from drinking. It kept me from, it gave me enough peace that I was able to get through that I had not found any other way. So that's the results of this program and learning acceptance in my life.
Man, what a powerful story. And it is difficult. And another concept, and we'll see where this concept fits into what you're practicing, is this idea that everything happens for a reason, that no meeting is by accident. You and I talking here today is not by accident, that everything has a purpose. Everything happens for a reason, the good, bad, the indifferent. And we don't always know what that reason is or why it's happening, but how does that fit into your story there? And did that play into your acceptance that everything is the way that it was meant to be?
I don't entirely buy that, quite honestly, Mike. Just quite honestly. But I do buy that it is as it is right now. So Byron Katie says that it should have happened because it did happen. And I'm like, okay. And if it did happen, then you've got to accept it as it is right now. It has nothing to do with whether it should be or whether, it was, it was meant to be this way, or you don't even have to figure that out. I don't have to ask why. But what I have to do is accept in this moment. It's interesting. There's a Bible quote with that too, that they asked Jesus why the man was born blind. Did he sin or his parents sin? Who sinned? And Jesus' response was that you're asking the wrong question. You're asking why. When I say it's meant to be or all that, I'm trying to place a why on it. I'm trying to understand it, and he said that No, you're asking the wrong question. What you should be asking is, how can the Father be glorified? So, in a situation like that, instead of asking or saying, okay, it meant to be this way, so it is, I can say, okay, how can I find gratitude in this? How can I see gratitude in this situation? And so when I say meant to be or that kind of thing, it kind of, uh, it attaches all these other things to it that I'm not sure of. But I do know that if I accept it right now like it is, I can find peace. It doesn't have to be perfect for me to be at peace about something, which is how I used to think. I had to orchestrate life to give me peace and joy, right? And now I've learned that I orchestrate life. I have to accept. And once I accept, I had nothing to do with it turning out any way, good or bad or anything. It only had to do with me accepting it as it was in that moment and just letting it be. So, I do see providence, though, in that, in my experience, I see, one thing leads to another, just like water runs downhill always. If it's not being controlled by some other external force, it's always you're never going to make it run uphill. You're never going to be surprised one day and it not drain down the pipe. It's going to do that. Everything else, all other things being equal. In the same way, I think every detail of our lives works into something good. So I don't know if it's meant to be or if we just make the best decisions we can in the moment and they work out to something good. I don't know which it is. It really doesn't matter. I just know that it works into something good always. And that's been my experience all my life. And if I give things long enough, I'm going to see how that experience worked into something good. I used to think I was bouncing around all the time when things happened. But when I look back, I see a straight line from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And I know it's going to work into something good. I do know that from my experience. So that's how I look at that. It's a little different, but a lot the same. A lot the same.
What's funny about that is that however we get to that point in understanding it, it's an interesting concept, because the fact is however we got there, we can't change the path. We can't change what happened. What happened, happened. And when you go to, one of the advantages to going to a lot of meetings, and for those of you that aren't going to meetings, whatever those meetings may be, Celebrate Recovery Dharma, AANAGASA, whatever your preferences, I recommend doing it, because one of the reasons why you want to go is not just the community, but also seeing how recovery or non-recovery works. And what happens is the people that really struggle with recovery, and this is just Mike's opinion here, this is my assessment over the years, is that the people that keep dwelling on the path, they've not accepted the path. They've not accepted the things that have happened in their life, thinking that if I keep dwelling on it, if I keep talking about it, if I keep living in that, whatever that moment is, that problem is, that somehow it's going to change. It's not going to change. What has happened has happened. And what we need to do is move forward in our life, because it's the sort of that repeating the trauma over and over and over in our lives. It keeps us in that trauma. And meanwhile, it perpetuates our sickness, and we're only going to get well when we move forward. And that kind of sounds like what you're talking about, is it? Am I on track with that?
It is. And there's one book that really, I want to mention this book before I forget. It's not a recovery book. It's David Hawkins' The Pathway to Surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an incredible book that is really the how-to for the first 3 steps. And that was where I started learning about allowing myself to be with whatever emotions I'm having. If I feel angry, stop resisting it. When I resist, those things increase. So I learned when I stopped resisting my anger and I just let myself be angry, it went away almost immediately. And it amazed me how well that worked, because my anger continued when I was resisting being angry. So I allowed myself to be angry for a minute, and it went away immediately. I was so surprised. So when this was my first real, with my son, was the first real death of someone close that I had to deal with. in my life, and I'm in my mid 50s. So I just have not ever had to deal with that, especially someone that close, a child never. And I just let myself grieve instead of resisting the grief. When I needed to, I'd take a couple hours and sit and cry, and just let myself grieve. And I learned that when those things come up, to just let it happen. And that's all the gifts of recovery, Mike. I would not have learned that if I had not been on this path. And anyone that's having difficulty with the first three steps, I would really suggest Hawkins' book, The Pathway to Surrender. So it is an incredible book. And actually, I have links for that book and some other books that we use at buddyc.org if somebody has difficulty finding them.
Yeah.
But that's an incredible book. I go through it with sponsees. Actually, we read it. That's one of the books we read after we finish the steps and the traditions. Is one of the first books is Hawkins' book. He's got several books, but the Pathway to Surrender is the one that we read. It's his experience learning surrender. And so,
well, it's undeniable. Incredible. I know in my experience, everybody that is in long-term recovery that I know has a fairly well-developed spiritual program. And notice I said spiritual program, not necessarily religious. It could be a religious program. I would say that I kind of go more in that direction myself. But again, I have my own personal belief systems, and it's worked for me for the last 10 years. I've stayed sober the last 10 years to this point. And but you notice the one thing that we don't do, and you're not doing here, is we don't push our belief systems on anyone else. But what is undeniable, though, is everybody in long-term recovery has developed some sort of spiritual program, and it just gives you a deeper understanding of life, the bigger picture of life, and your purpose in this world. That at least that's how I look at it. Is that how you look at it?
It is, and what I've learned to do is narrow that down to how can I be of help in this moment. Yeah. And how can I be of help in the next? Well, before we started the podcast, my first question to you was, what do you need from me today? Because I tried to come without an agenda so that we could, so that I could give, because different podcasts want different things, and I said, what do you want from me today? What can I do for you? And I try to approach every interaction that way, from, when I'm driving, to when any interaction with business or any personal interaction. I have learned that if I cater to you, it's like the old Zig Ziglar saying of, if you help someone else get what they need, you'll get what you need,
Yeah.
And so it's just that way, and it's so simple. And it really is not up to what, we don't have to believe a particular thing. I think all those beliefs are like different paths going up the same mountain. And the further up the mountain we get, the closer those paths come together, and the more similar they look. The further up the mountain we get. Starting out, they look totally different, but then we start seeing, I start seeing God as being love when I may not have known that before. Or I start seeing, if I'm reading the Zen Buddhist literature, all those Zen masters came back to compassion. They said, when you get rid of self, all that's left is compassion. I said, I see that. I see it, because that's what I'm experiencing. I don't want to, I get rid of self. I don't want to, go hurt someone. I want to be compassionate. It's just natural then, and I was just in my way is the problem, to step out of the way and allow life to happen and just be there, instead of thinking I've got to run the world, because I don't. And it works fantastic. I had a sponsor that taught me that, and it works incredibly. You just get like you said, the right people you need show up when it's time for them to be there.
Yeah.
The right books, the right everything. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
But it's incredible.
It is. And I'll tell you that when you meet somebody that's in recovery, you when you're around meetings or just in life, I mean, even in the workplace, I've known this, and there's just a certain aura about people and the way that they handle the business and how they handle their daily lives. When I meet people that are in deep recovery, you know it. Conversely, when you are around people in recovery settings that truly are not It's amazing. You can go to meetings, and I can watch people, and the people that relapse, I see it coming. You actually see it coming, just based on how they talk, what they do, how they act, how they behave. You see it coming from a mile away. And conversely, somebody that's going to do well, you see that as well. And it's because they start exhibiting behaviors like what you're talking about. And just what they talk about, the subject matter of what they talk about, change. It's a profound change that's noticeable.
Yes. I agree 100%.
Now, and I'm pointing at myself first. I mean, until I had that profound change in my basic thinking about this world and my role in it, that's when I had that seismic shift of thought. That's when things started happening for me in a positive way.
And that's what the 6th and 7th steps do for me too. Is what I'm really doing is love is changing, because I have to choose to love. I have to choose to think about you before I'm changed. And I think that's exhibited in most of the tools that we use with all of our 4-step inventory. If I have a fear, I use page 84 in the big book, and I pray for someone who has a fear. I think it's May 9th in the Daily Reflections that actually talks about that. A person in recovery had a fear of elevators, and they had decided they were going to walk through their fear, and they show up at the elevator, and a lady's cowered in the corner afraid. They go over and comfort them, and they got over their fear of elevators. So that idea in everything works. It's worked for me incredibly. And then I change when I choose to help you. Then that gets love in a place in my life, and I stand aside enough to where I can start changing myself. It works every time, every time.
It does. And so when people ask, is addiction a choice or is it a disease? Well, it's a little bit of both. And the disease part we have no control over. Just like if I get cancer, I don't have control over that. If I have diabetes, if I have a number of ailments, allergies, things like that, I don't have any control over that. But what we do have control over is what we do about it and making that choice. Like you said, I can choose to stay in my sickness, or I can choose to get well. And if I choose to get well, then it behooves me to listen to those that have walked that path and gotten well, and then look at what they did to get well. That's the choice part.
Yeah, I had a sponsee that could not get sober. He just kept drinking. And I said, I want you to call me when you're on your way home, and let's talk. And he was sincere. He just couldn't get it, so to speak. He couldn't, he just did not know how to stop. And I asked him, I said, what speaks to you spiritually? I said, I think it's meetings, correct? He says, meetings meeting every day, drinking or not. I want you in a meeting. I said, I don't care if you have to take Uber. I don't care what you do. I want you texting me at night with what meeting you went to that day. If I don't get a text from you, I'll assume you don't want me to be your sponsor anymore. I mean, it was down to that, where I had to just kind of threaten him almost. And so, I did. I told him, I said, if you want me to be your sponsor, you're going to have to take the action that I suggest, and I want you in a meeting every day. He said, okay, I will. Drinking or not? I said, drinking or not, be in a meeting. So he started doing that. Within 2 weeks, he stayed sober and been sober ever since, and that was several years ago. But if we can look at what speaks to us spiritually, because that's the change. It's not willpower or trying harder. It's what are we putting our effort toward? Are we putting our effort toward willpower, or are we putting our effort toward getting out of the way so it can be done for us? And the latter for me always works.
Yeah, this is not osmosis, and I heard that. I know my sponsor said that early on. It's not like you go to bed at night and put the big book underneath your pillow and magically information.
It'd be nice if it worked that way, wouldn't it?
It'd be nice if I just let me put my hand on it and I'll absorb the information. No, you have to work. Actually, recovery is a lot of work. It's a hell of a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it can be done. And how do I know that? Because we've proven that it can be done. And folks, life just gets better. It gets better. It really does. It's not going to be perfect, but it gets better. It can't not get better. It's just like, I love the analogy. You said water goes downhill. It does. If you walk outside today and water's flowing uphill, you better, I think, the rapture's coming. You better, you better get ready for end times. But the thing is that recovery is that way. I've never met anyone that said to me, "Hey, Mike, you know what? So I've been doing this recovery business, and guess what? The day I got sober, my life has gotten crappier." I've not met that person. I've not met that person. No, not at all. No. And, the funny thing is that if I could go back and drink quote unquote responsibly today, I wouldn't do it because I don't know about you, buddy, but I don't have time. I don't have time for it. At a minimum, when I was drinking, it took time away. Drinking itself, and then I was never productive in the morning. Now I'm hitting the road running from the minute I get up until the minute I go to bed. I mean, literally from the minute I get up until the minute I go to bed, and I don't have time. I don't have time for it.
That's the reason they call alcohol spirits, is because it's a substitute.
Yeah, I've thought about that. Actually, I've talked about that before on this podcast. As a matter of fact, It's interesting that we call alcohol spirits. A spirit is a thing. It's an entity. It's like a living entity. And in fact, when people get into early sobriety, you often hear people say, "I was married to the bottle." My wife used to say, "The bottle is your bride." I'm not your bride. The bottle is your bride. Mm-hmm. We're talking about like a living thing. It's interesting that we don't refer to it as being inanimate. We talk about it being animate. It's weird. Because we don't do that with anything else.
Yeah, and it was so important. It was the most important thing in my life. I made sure I had alcohol, regardless of what else I had. I had alcohol. Mm-hmm. If anyone wants to look at verses of the book, they can go to buddyc.org, and there's several verses there on the front page that they can read. There's lots of good stuff there. If I'll just read a couple real quick if I can, and then we can close. Let's see. Here's verse 14. The way of sobriety. Try to look and it cannot be seen. Try to hear and it cannot be heard. Try to grasp and it cannot be understood. These three blend together as one and are beyond comprehension. The aspects of sobriety that are revealed are not dazzling. The aspects of sobriety that are hidden are not obscure. Sobriety has no agenda other than to show you how to return to your original surrendered nature. The way of sobriety weaves through all of life. What is this way? When I help you, I am really helping me. I mean, that's the program. Mm-hmm. And what I did was that was verse 14. So if anyone who's read the Tao Te Ching, they could take verse 14 from a number of translations and say, "Oh, I see what he's talking about there," because that's where I just took it and put that through a lens of recovery. So another good one that I really like is verse 50. Dying to Live is the title I put on this. All who have drawn a breath abide in one of these categories. About a third live cautious, uneventful lives. About a third are self-destructive, reckless, and overindulgent. About a third start out living a full life, then unknowingly are overtaken by fear. A small fraction find a way of living that frees them from the fear of death. How is this possible? They have already died. Yeah.
That is powerful stuff.
Yeah, I got 3 different meetings that are using this for text for their meeting, which is incredible. I never would have thought that. They contacted me. There's one in Missouri that was starting, and there's one in India that's using it. And then I had a podcast that was using it, and they've moved on to other texts now. That was Mark with Recovered Cast. He used it for several months for text. So, I mean, it's just incredible. It's such a gift. And that's why, I have the book in Amazon so anybody can buy it. But I also needed to make the PDF available because it was a gift to me. I've got to give it. I can't be stingy with this. I mean, how can I when it was a gift to me?
That's right. No, and that's important. That's important. And that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here on this podcast. Right. Getting this information out to as many people as we can, because addiction is just, it's a pandemic. That is really the pandemic. Guys, you understand that the number one cause of death for Americans between the age of 18 and 49 is addiction. That's the number one cause of death. And we've got to do something about this, because if we don't, then no one else will. So, buddy, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it as well. Thanks.
One last time, give for the listeners, let them know how they can get in touch with you, and you'll close us out.
Sure. buddyc.org. Several resources there, including a nightly meeting that we started at the first of the pandemic, the Fourth Dimensioners. It's now has its own group, Conscience, and 7 nights a week at 9 p.m. Eastern. And the links are all there in the resources for that. We've got all kinds of other resources there. We've got a daily devotion if you'd like it, all kinds of things at buddyc.org. And then you can contact me from there if you can't afford a copy of the book, or you would just like a PDF of the book, which I like having those to search with. You're welcome. Just email me from the website, and you're welcome to, I'll be happy to send you a copy.
Oh, that's fantastic. Folks, reach out to Buddy C. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure that you got a lot out of this, because I know I did. I know I got a lot of information out of this, and that's what we do. Folks, that's what we do in recovery is, we don't represent anyone other than ourselves. I know we're talking about groups in here, and we're quoting the big book, and we're talking about books and things, but we don't represent these organizations. What we're doing is we're just talking about what has helped us to get well, because that's the most important thing. You find your own path, and you do what you can to get well. And if we've said anything that doesn't apply to you or you don't agree with, then just discard it. But try to listen to information, take what works for you, and if you can use it for yourself and help others with that, then that's what we're going to do. And that's exactly what Buddy's doing here today, because that's what we do in recovery. We help ourselves along the way, and we help to impart the knowledge that we've gained to others as well. And, folks, don't forget that we have been sponsored by FHE Health down there in Florida. And according to SAMHSA, first responders are 30% more likely to develop behavioral health conditions like PTSD. And FHE Health specializes in getting help for first responders and getting them better and getting them cleared for duty. And find out more from our good friends at FHE Health at FHEHealth.com. And with that, please visit our Facebook page, which is Recovery is Possible, and our website, VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com, and let me know how I am doing, because I'd love to hear from you. And if there's a topic that you'd be interested in hearing about, I'd love to hear from you. So you guys take care of yourselves, and we will talk with you next time. Buddy C, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.